Welcome to today's CFDA Professional Development Conversation, which kicks off our two-part series, bringing the voices of the Native American and Indigenous design community to our audience. These conversations will highlight the cultural, social, and professional experiences of Native American and Indigenous designers and industry professionals, as well as the many traditions that influence their design and craft. We aim to openly discuss the challenges faced by the Native American and Indigenous design community within the larger context of the American fashion industry, and create a space to discuss how designers, brands, and the fashion industry at large can better create opportunities to collaborate, work, support, and provide equitable and inclusive business practices. We're so honored to have Christian Allaire leading these two conversations for us. Christian is a fashion and style writer at Vogue and the author of the book, The Power of Style, How Fashion and Beauty Are Being Used to Reclaim Cultures. So it's my pleasure to hand this over to Christian, who will help us welcome our incredible group of designers and industry professionals. So welcome, Christian.
Miigwech, thank you for having me. So excited to be here. A little bit about myself before we get to our fabulous group. I'm from Nipissing First Nation, which is a Northern Reservation, Ontario, Canada. And yeah, now I'm the writer for Vogue, fashion writer, and I cover a lot of Indigenous fashion. So I think today is going to be a really insightful talk, very informative, lots of amazing people in the scene here. So I just want to jump right into it, to be honest. What I'd like to start with is to just have everyone go around, briefly introduce yourself and what you do. Maybe let's start with Amy.
Hi, everybody. My name's Amy Danette Diehl. I'm a Danette designer based out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been in the fashion industry for close to 36 years now. And just really honored to be here with so many wonderful talents in our industry and our Indigenous community today. And my brand is for Kinship, which is a community-led brand that basically does upcycling, sustainable design, all sorts of ways that we help and give back to our Indigenous community here in the Southwest. But yeah, thanks so much for everybody for joining us today.
Crystal, want to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Christian. Hi to the panel. My name is Crystal Lacohak. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation, which is located in Oklahoma, and our traditional homelands were in the Kansas and Nebraska territories before we were removed to Oklahoma. But I'm the founder and executive director of Illuminatives, which is a national Native American woman-led social and racial justice organization that really works to amplify the contemporary voices, stories, and issues of Native peoples to build power and advance justice for our people. And I'm coming to you today from the traditional homelands of the Piscataway people, also known as Washington, D.C. Thanks.
Amazing. Let's go over to Amber Dawn.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Amber Dawn Barrow. I'm from the Siksika Nation, which is in Alberta, Canada. I have been in Santa Fe working for the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts, as well as an art historian for the Institute of American Indian Arts. I've been here for about 10 years, and I forget everything I was going to say. Okay. So anyways, it's early in the morning here in Santa Fe for me. So I'm very happy to be here. I do the Santa Fe Indian Market Fashion Show. This will be 8th year. I'm very happy to be producing that. We'll be in person, and I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Let's go to Bethany.
Good morning, Pibishab, everyone. My name is Bethany Yellowtail. I'm the founder of Be Yellowtail and the Be Yellowtail Collective. We're a women's contemporary fashion brand and Indigenous digital arts marketplace that supports Native American, First Nations, and Indigenous entrepreneurs. And I am originally from the Northern Cheyenne and Crow Nations. I belong to the Greasy Mouth clan, and I was raised in the Mighty Few district of the Apsáalooke Nation. But currently I call Tongva Territory, Los Angeles home, where I operate my business.
Amazing. And then Eric, last but not least.
Honey Bonjour, Christian. Good morning, everybody. Great to see everybody this morning. I'm Eric Brote. I'm Ojibwe from northern Minnesota, so just on the other side of the border from where Christian's from. And I am one of the co-founders of GNU, which is the only American Indian-owned denim brand in the world. And I am the COO of GNU right now. My wife, Amanda, who is Oneida and Stockbridge Muncie, is the CEO of GNU. And we function, in addition to being more of a niche premium denim brand, we also function as a talent incubator to elevate Indigenous people within the continuum of the fashion ecosystem, from behind the scenes stuff to also bringing up like younger designers as well. So good morning.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thanks for all for joining us. I'm really excited to jump in. A lot of you share a lot of same themes and messages in your work, but I'm going to kind of go through it all. I really kind of wanted to start with Crystal. You know, tell us a bit about the backstory for launching Illuminatives. What did you want to bring with this platform?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, I think, you know, to understand why Illuminative exists, you know, it's kind of taking a step back into our creation story. And I founded and co-led a project called the Reclaiming Native Truth Project that ran from 2016 to 2018. And it was the largest public opinion research and strategy project ever done. It was about a $3.3 million project. And what we did, we worked with diverse researchers from all over the country, including Indigenous researchers, to really try to get into the minds of Americans and key institutions in America. What do American people and institutions and industries think about Native people? Why do they think that? And how do those perceptions affect the way that Native peoples are treated in our everyday lives, in the courts and Congress and media and other key sectors? We really wanted to kind of understand that. And the number one thing we learned from all of this research over 2 years was that the biggest sort of challenge in many ways to Native peoples in this country is that nearly 80% of Americans know little to nothing about Native people. And there's a really significant percentage that if you don't live somewhere kind of adjacent to a reservation here in the United States, you're not necessarily sure if Native Americans even still exist, which was really like profound, I think, when we really were able to kind of put our hands on that number. And then as we began to do more research, we found that 72% of Americans rarely or never encounter information about contemporary Native people. We also learned that when you do Google searches, right, and you type in keywords like Native American, 95% of those images will come up before 1900 and usually only of men. And as we looked at our Native American representation, for example, in TV and film, our representation hovers somewhere between 0 and 0.04%. Finally, we learned through research done by Professor Sarah Shearer that nearly 90% of the schools in this country don't teach about Native Americans past 1900. So literally generation of Americans coming out of the K through 12 education system are almost conditioned to think that the stopping point was 1900 and that they literally have a hard time visualizing Native Americans in a contemporary context. So what did this all tell us? That this is big systems in this country, from pop culture to media, entertainment, education, the government, that are literally institutionalizing and perpetuating our erasure. What's the effect of that? Erasure really serves to dehumanize Native Americans so that we don't exist in people's mind's eye because they can't see us, they don't read about us, they don't know about our lives except for what they see and what little makes it on TV and film or what they read from an old history book. And that dehumanization really serves to fuel bias and discrimination against our people. It causes people to have a lack of empathy or to think that we face discrimination. It also, we really found, almost reduces us and objectifies us to objects and things, right? We're cars, we're butter. We're only known for the sum total of maybe our design and our arts and culture that people appropriate and take. because they feel like it's for the taking. And what other little representation Americans see is really about these kind of toxic false narratives of racist sports mascots, right? This kind of false representation that kind of shows up, and it really causes a lot of harm. So we formed Illuminative with the sum total of this research to really understand that it is critical that we disrupt and interrupt this erasure, active erasure and invisibility, which is really the modern form of racism against Native Americans, right? Which also silences our voices when we stand up to say no to harm that's being caused to our communities. And in doing and disrupting that erasure is really about centering Native voices. It's about centering Native peoples to be the agents of narrative change and Native-led solutions, and to really lead, you know, these lives in business and education and entertainment, to really center our voices, our stories, and to really reclaim that for ourselves, because it's been so appropriated for so long.
Yeah, no, it's such amazing work that you're doing. And I think it's also something I could talk very much to Amber Dunn about, because I think, you know, the annual Swai show really is more than just a fashion show. You know, it's showing all these different tribes and how we're not all the same. You know, we all have very different ways of designing, producing, viewing the world. Can you tell me why it's so important, you know, to continue the show and what it brings to, you know, outsiders, maybe? I think you're on mute. Oh, you're still on mute. Does anyone else hear her, or is it just me? Okay, I'll come back to you. But let's go to, well, let's go to Bethany. I want to talk to you, Bethany. I think you can obviously speak as a designer, you know, what inspires your work. I would love to hear how your culture and your upbringing really goes into your designs.
Yeah, well, really, my upbringing, heritage, and my personal upbringing really inform and anchor who I am, period. And so that has a lot to do with the way I operate business, the way I think about design, the way I utilize design. And I'm incredibly inspired by the way that our people have always utilized design with great purpose and intention. And when you get keen to design, it's how it's distinct to tribal nations, you can really see that it was always utilized as identifiers. It connects us to our homelands, it connects us to our histories, our stories, and tribe to tribe, family to family. You know, those interpretations may differ, but they really anchor us to the places that we're the caretakers of, and we still are. They connect us to the places that our tribal nations still live in. And so for me, I love to look at old Absalaga, Northern Cheyenne design. Our tribes are from the Northern Plains. So for those of you who aren't familiar with where those nations are, it's in southeastern Montana. And there's really distinct designs all over the world, all over Indigenous North America, and especially in the Northern Plains. You can really see cultural motifs that show up in those places. And so I like to reimagine those designs for our textiles and reinterpret them in ways that anybody can wear, but they also are really anchored in you know, the stories that come from my perspective.
Love that. And Amber, Dawn, are you here?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hey,
yes. It was somebody called me and it screwed up the whole, I don't know what it is. I'm used to Zoom, not webinar. Anyways, I'm back.
You're
technical back. Issues aside. So I want to say this.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it back to you. You know, I'm going to go back to the question, because I think you know, Bethany has such a strong point of view, and like in your show, there's every designer shows there is bringing their story to the stage. So tell us a bit about the show. Why is it so important too?
Absolutely. And I think I just want to say SWI is the acronym for the Southwestern Association for Indian Arts. And SWI as an organization was founded or started, rooted in 1922, actually even before that. And now the SWI is entering its 100th year. The fashion show has been taking place for the past 8 years, but Swai represents artists from both Canada and the United States. So naturally, the fashion show highlights artists from both Canada and the United States. And I also wanted to address what Crystal is saying. Those are really stats for America. And of course, this is the Designers of America organization. But when you look at the Indigenous fashion and arts up in Canada, it's a much different scene, much different awareness, much different representation, also a different funding, which then develops and nurtures a different kind of artistic creative voice and expression. Presenting the diversity of Indigenous diners is imperative for a plethora of reasons. A basic one is who wants to see the same concept over and over and over. And I think it's important to clarify on not just the Indigenous platform, but on the larger social discourse platform, the diversity of Indigenous art, design, and culture. And because one designer does not speak for all of the diverse Indigenous nations, right? Like I'm from Siksika Nation up in cold Calgary, Canada, the plains. My historical history and present day situation is much different than someone living in Tucson, in Arizona, or from a Pueblo in the Southwest. So when you come from different regions, that's naturally going to inspire a different art form, a different design, and different concepts. So I think it's so important to display that on a artistic, but also design, a runway platform, just the diversity of Indigenous artists. Because I think too often the narrative is that when people think of Indian style or Indian art, you think of the teepee behind me, buckskin beads and leather. But this is a contemporary piece. This is by this is by Jameson Chase Banks. He's a professor at the Institute of American Indian Arts. So the diversity is important on many, many different levels, which I could talk, forever about.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorite parts, is always learning about people's unique stories and where they come from and how that comes through in their work. That's the best part. And Amy, I actually want to talk to you because I feel like, For Kinship is very much focused on the community where you're from or where you are now, and sort of fostering a bit of a community there. So tell me how sort of that culture and, being based there comes through in your work.
Yeah. So the Danette, we're like 175,000 people, over 27,000 square miles, over 3 states, in the Southwest. So I can't really speak for all Danette, but I can speak through my lens and experience. I feel that we are deeply connected with nature, and it's this deep connection with the land that really comes out in so many ways with different artisans. Navajo design is diverse, it's expansive because we are such a big tribe. But I guess through the fashion lens, and also just because I'm a complete and total textile nerd, I mean, those people that know me, it would really be through the stories of our weaving. That's really an area where I'm so honored to do a lot of my community work in Two Gray Hills, where we have some of the most amazing weavers from our tribe. So I think this is an area we all need to reflect on, how we've worked in the past by using these patterns into inspired designs and really lead the way to a different future. I'm loving the projects we have going on right now with active sports companies that have come together to support the Danette Skate Garden project. It's a project where we're helping a community out in Northwest New Mexico break ground on a skate park this fall on Navajo Nation. And it's just amazing to me the way that fashion active sports companies have come together to work with a Navajo brand to actually do product and collabs that are going to give back to the Danette community. And this is really what I want to foster more and more of is, how can we do this where fashion actually doesn't just take that we give back, we actually lead these community-led projects with other companies. So that's the dream, is just to see more of that.
I agree, love that. And Eric, I mean, since we're both Ojibwe, I feel like I know very much about your tribe, but I would love to learn about how, something like Ojibwe culture can come through in a denim line, which people may not even think is possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of what we're trying to do much how some others have mentioned, is sharing like a contemporary narrative. Because as we look to the stories that we share, like we don't even speak for our tribes, like we speak for our own family stories and our own family histories, and the people that we knew and loved who have passed on, or even people that we never even had the chance to meet, but we've had their stories passed on in our families. And so every single garment that we make actually embodies a story of a real live person from our families. And it's a way for us not only to explore our own family culture and to pass it on, but also to acknowledge that, yeah, our families have existed since 1900. And yeah, we were involved in some really important things. And I think from like a denim perspective, I think some of the people who are held up as cultural icons in denim were actually really influenced by American Indian icons of their time, right? So you have like the Marlon Brandos, you know, the Steve McQueens, like people that are held up in this denim realm who were very influenced by people like Jimi Hendrix, like Buffy St. Marie, by the singers of like Redbone, like people who brought a different style to the 60s and 70s that influenced people like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that influenced Bob Dylan, that influenced the Beatles. Like people like that were influenced by people who were American Indian contemporaries of that time who brought their own story to their clothes, right? And that's really what we're trying to do, where we're not really in your face about some of the design elements that we have, but what we've ultimately done is removed hints of colonialism throughout the clothes and collections that we are inspired by, or things that we saw like in our relatives wearing, and then we made them to be similarly utilitarian, sustainable, and lasting a very long time. Like we make things to like meticulous specifications so they literally last for generations. And then we incorporate symbols that are important to us, right? I'm woodlands, right? We've got plants and we've got symbols and designs that are very specific to where we're at. And if you look at our clothing collection, you'll see them, they're included subtly, or they're things that will appear over time and you won't even notice or see them right away. And I think that's important to mention too, because there is this notion or concept that there's like real specific American Indian clothing, and you have to look like people looked in these pictures, like Crystal mentioned, from pre-1900. Yet when we look at the pictures of our family from 1900 to present, or even late 1800s to present, they weren't wearing the clothes that are featured in a lot of those pictures that you see on Google, right? And so bringing that to the forefront and ensuring that we can be who we are and we can have ourselves and our identity and our culture and symbols represented in those clothing every single day, and not just a few days a year at like ceremonial stuff, right? But like we are living and breathing and walking around every single day in a contemporary context.
Love that. That's great. And this is a question for Crystal, but I think all of you can answer this, so please jump in after. Is Crystal, I feel like a lot of your work is, you know, changing the narrative of what Native people are, what Native fashion is. And I'm curious to know, you know, what are some maybe stereotypes or preconceived notions about Indigenous fashion that you guys all want to see change?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as we looked at our research and like over time, I think the majority of Americans have such a narrow and flat view of Native peoples. I mean, they literally think Native Americans are a population. We all speak the same language. We all look alike. We all dress alike, right? And a lot of that, again, comes out of the K through 12 education system, which 9 times out of 10 would only sort of give you a chapter maybe on the Indian Wars in the Northern Plains, and you kind of get a Northern Plains feel. Typically it's like 1890 Lakotas, and that's sort of in terms of the design aesthetic, right? There's sort of, or like the turkey feathers and sort of these depictions and representations of Native people and fashion that is actually conceived by non-Native people, and how it appears on screen, or Halloween costumes, or the gamut. And it really flattens people, right? And I think that was like one of the things, you know, that Amber was talking about, the sheer diversity, and looking that we have over 600 nations within this country, of Native nations, right? Each with their unique language, culture, design aesthetic, their creation stories, the stories that, you know, both Bethany and Eric were just talking about, that are so unique, those elements that really express who those people are and their kind of their worldview. And so I think what's so important as we think about changing the narrative, you know, we do that because we want to build power for our people. We want to be seen as human beings and have a seat at this broader, diverse American table, right? And have agency over our lives and how, you know, our things and ways are used. And so that is so important because it's not just only about, oh, we just want you to kind of see us in a certain way, right? We really want you to see our humanity. We want you to see our value and our worth and our contributions to this country. And so that's why we work so hard to really empower and celebrate and uplift the designers, just like the designers you see right now that are gathered, but Native people, contemporary Native people all across this country. And we also do that because there has been such a history of colonization and conquest and appropriation that it's almost a value, unfortunately, within the fashion industry and so many other industries in this country that believes that Native peoples, they just have the right to extract, right? And that's what we really found in our research. And so that's why, and as we lift up contemporary Native peoples and change the narrative, it's not just that we want you to buy contemporary Native fashion, we really want to change that dynamic and really create equity, right? When there has been none for a very long time.
And can I say something kind of on that note of diversity? Would we ask Tom Ford why is it important to show the diversity of American designers? Right? So Indigenous artists and designers get, I feel like we're fighting there's such a learning curve of even understanding the diversity of Indigenous art and culture and design across the board. And, you know, you asked me another question, Christian, in terms of no matter what label, the sense of craft and tradition is always present. Yes, that is absolutely true. Tremendous skill and technique, but also innovation and technology is important with many designers. You look at Adrian Pinnacus, and he was doing 3D printing designs a few years ago on the Swai fashion runway. You have Skawanati, who's using cyberspace to influence her designs. You have Catherine Blackbird, you know, and the list goes on in terms of technology is absolutely also really important. And, you know, technology has been fused with tradition since, you know, colonizers came in touch with this land. The colonizers, Europeaners, were both influenced both ways. Indigenous designers were influenced by the Victorian style when you look at the Victorian era, and non-Native people who came here at the beginning were influenced and needed to survive to get help and assistance on how to dress. And so if you go back historically, you know, culture and tradition and innovation is always changing. It's a living and breathing entity.
I'd like to ping pong off of what Crystal and Amberdawn and also Eric said, thinking about the ways that our people have always, again, going back to utilizing design, even when our people didn't have much to work with, like, damn, we knew how to dress. Like, our people were always presented well when we're on the battlefield, when we're moving camp, when we're parading to the next, you know, location for the season. Like, our people always were dressed and utilized all the things around us to adorn ourselves, and they had purpose and intent. And it's so fascinating to see the ways that, like, our traditional arts, quill work, parfleche painting, beadwork, weaving, how those ways have translated over time, and that thread is really still here in our communities, right? Like, since we're all from our communities, we see the ways that it's connected and it's anchored from the things that have been passed to our ancestors. And so reason being why I'm really excited about this panel is because, as Crystal said, a lot of Americans and of course a lot of CFDA members, I'm sure, have never had the opportunity to meet people like us. And so my purpose to say today is, like, our communities are filled to the brims of brilliant creative makers. We have so many, like, there are enough creative Native people in all ways to fill the marketplace. And I think it's really essential to say that today, that with opportunity and the adequate resources, this could be good for everybody. And I want to see our people have opportunities. I want to see my relatives be able to pay their bills. I want to see my relatives not have to live under the poverty line. I want to see them have access to clean water. I want our people to have basic human needs met. And I really believe that. Imagine what fashion could do, our part in the matter, right?
Yes, no, I think that's such a good point is we bring forward such good qualities that anyone can learn about in fashion and should be applied to fashion. One of them being, I think, sustainability, which is inherent, I think, in any Indigenous designer in some way. I know Amy and Eric, you both do this in some way, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, why being, eco-friendly is just something that's so inherent to Indigenous people.
Hi. Yeah, it's just definitely the thinking beyond just this generation. I mean, that's the basis of sustainable design, is making decisions for future generations. I think everybody on this panel today that's the essence of how we live and how we have lived, and how that goes forward. And that just brings up how important it is that we support our young emerging designers. We need to have more mentorships. We need more scholarships. We need more internships. We need more collaborations that actually help elevate and empower the emerging artists, and help them really break this cycle where it's like the system has so much inequity or inequality. I'm sorry, there's so much inequality within the system. Is how can we help our young and emerging designers find a place in the space? So that's what I'd ask everybody on this call today, is how can we step up? How can we do more together to really help create a supportive environment for all the young designers that are coming forward?
Yeah, but I say we also need to create a space for our senior established designers who are well known within native country, but are not well known on the larger platform of the American fashion discourse. And I have to say, one of my best friends, Jessica Metcalf, the founder of Beyond Buckskin Boutique, she just sent me a little note. Lloyd Kiva knew, he said that there's nothing more American than Native Americans. And so Native people should be at the core of American fashion. And the one thing that separates us from all American countries can be the thing that makes us unique and special and significant. Quote Jessica Metcalf, Beyond Buckskin Boutique, who was really one of the leaders and instrumental to bringing Native fashion design to a central place where people could come by and support Indigenous designers and not buy the knockoffs. This was in 2012. She launched Beyond Buckskin Boutique. People were like, well, how can I support Native art? How can I, do something to help make a difference in terms of an action plan? And Jessica Metcalf really is one of the front runners in doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And not to push the eco agenda, but I do want to go back to the point of sustainability, because I do think it's really, and Eric, I think I actually want to throw it to you, is because I know you try to, be as sustainable as possible when you're making your stuff. You don't do, thousands of denim jackets, you keep it tight. So why is that important, do you think, is to take that approach?
A lot. There's a number of pieces that I have in my own personal archives and collection, and things that I wear still that are from people in my family that I never got to meet. Like, these pieces lasted that long. They were passed down for generations, and we'll still pass them down for generations. I think that's like these beans that are growing behind me, these beans have been passed down in our family for thousands of generations. Think about that. Like this exact strain right here, before people began coming here on boats, forced or by their own volition. Like, we passed these things down, just like some of the things I have in our collection. And I've looked at those pieces and thought, like, what if we actually created garments and created using like contemporary textiles, right? Improving upon things, but made them thinking about passing them off to our future generations. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and you have to be very meticulous with your design, and you have to be relentless in your construction and working with factory partners that are willing not to cut corners, right? It takes way more time than if we would just throw out a collection every season and hope that people buy it and then we can jump on to the next thing. And we're already on to like 3 or 4 seasons ahead, right? We're thinking about passing these things down. And even with like the t-shirts and sweatshirts that we're launching this year, there are garments, because I played football in college, there are garments I have from college that were team issued that have outlasted nearly every other t-shirt and every other sweatshirt I have ever purchased. What makes these different, right? Or even a college issue sweatshirt I have from one of my parents. Like it was issued in the late 60s and early 70s, and it's still around and used like every day. Are you kidding me? And so we've recreated those textiles and those fabrics, and then we've paid close attention to construction so that things really last a long time, right? Buying one sweatshirt instead of 30 over 10 years, right? And making sure that it's a design and that it's utilitarian, and it's also a silhouette that people will appreciate over time and not following quick trends. Does that answer your question, Christian?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Built to last, you know. I think that's inherent for all the designers on this call. So I actually think we have some questions, but I do want to end with one broader question for you all before we get to those, is sort of the power of collaboration. I think you all do this in some way. You know, Bethany with the Yellowtail Collective, you're highlighting other artists. Crystal, you're amplifying a lot of voices. Amber Dawn, you're, you know, working with designers and giving them a platform, like you all do this in some way. So I'm curious to, you know, what power do you see in Indigenous collaboration for the future? And anyone can answer this.
Okay, can I say something first? Just in terms of collaboration, and it's going to be publicly released in terms of a press release soon. Swai Fashion is partnering with the Supernatural Models in Vancouver and the Vancouver Indigenous Fashion Week and the Toronto Indigenous Fashion Week. And the goal, at least in terms of my collaboration, is to work with these international fashion organizations and for Swai Fashion to actually grow into a Swai Fashion Week to give a broader platform for Indigenous art and design.
That's great. Well, I think, Christian, I think one thing I would say just in terms of Illuminative, but I think what's been really fun and interesting is that I recently joined the board of advisors for Faraday Brand. And, you know, we met Faraday a few years ago, and they were really interested in, you know, partnerships about how they could help to support the mission of Illuminative by, you know, selling different products. And I think it was really at that moment that they realized that they were actually appropriating Native design and not doing it right, doing the right thing. And so it was really through that conversation with them that educating them about the harm that's created when you appropriate and do that, and really their journey in building a partnership with Bethany and now Stephen Paul Judd, and really, you know, but sitting on that board and really looking at, you know, I think that there's such an opportunity for these partnerships between Native designers, Native artists, Native communities, and these other non-Native fashion brands and companies, right? To do that in a good way, right? Where it's centering equity, it's centering Native voices and artists, and that they have control and ownership over their design, and that there's an equitable partnership. And as Bethany said, this is a model that can be good for everybody, right? And to really be a part of just a lot of education and I think a lot of humility by a company like Faraday to admit that it's made mistakes, and it's really working, I think, every day to look at how is it repairing the harm that's been done before, and how in learning and being so open and knowing that this can be a really good thing for everyone. It can be profitable, equitable, make people feel good, customers feel good, you know, and that's really important. And on the same time, we can also, while supporting those really unique collaborations, we can also do the and support Native owned businesses as well. And it's all good for the marketplace, and that it's done in a good way. But I think, you know, it's really about setting down this marker within the industry to say no more on appropriation, no more exploitation. anymore, because we've reached a moment, and I think 2020 has hopefully started something. It's a longer term shift, but I think Native peoples have finally said enough is enough, and I see a movement building where there's accountability that is really now expected from big brands, that the harmful practices of the past can no longer continue, but there's so much opportunity when people can come together and do it in the right way.
And Crystal, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, you know, we've been a brand for over a decade, and it's really interesting to me how it feels like we haven't really been noticed until the last like 2 or 3 years. And I suspect that probably has a lot to with what you're doing with Illuminatives, because now we're having people who are like, our collections being included in movies now. Like, we have like really profoundly influential actors and actresses who are reaching out to us, who are like wearing our collection, and they're insisting that these things be included in their movies and shows, and not in like a Native spotlight way, but in like, this is what we're gonna cast, this is what we're gonna style our cast in. And that's been a really exciting thing to experience and see. And I think in the US, we've really been overlooked, right? We've been invited to Toronto Indigenous Fashion Week. We've shown in Tokyo in denim stuff, right? We've shown in European Fashion Week. We've never shown anywhere in the US. And it just feels like there's a demand and there's an awareness outside of America about Indigenous fashion, where they really want it. Whereas like, and they want an authentic Indigenous voice, whereas like in the US, the shows really don't want that, and they want to extract these ideas and interpret it in their own way, but they don't maybe even realize that there are Indigenous people out there who can do this stuff. And so it's been an interesting journey for us to see how much awareness there is outside of America in this realm. You know, Amber, you've mentioned like Canada, like they are all over this, right? And it's been really fun to be able to engage with folks just across the border and to have them acknowledge our collection, to have Europe's Fashion Week acknowledge our collection, and like even in like Tokyo and Asia. Like, it's been a ton of fun, and maybe our moment will come in the US. We'll see.
It will.
Bethany, Amy, any final thoughts on this before we open it up to questions?
Yeah, I guess just echoing what Crystal and Eric have both said, really when we're talking about, you know, the harm that appropriation does, the opportunity that where we are at in this current time, is that we have an opportunity to do something different that works well for everyone, that actually benefits our communities. We love our people. Like, I love that I come from the mighty few. I love my communities, and I want to see Native people shine. That's just like, I love our people. I love our community. And I would love to connect anyone who may be interested in doing something different, being an ally in the matter, being an ally to like allow Native people to lead for once. There's so much good that can come out of it for everybody. And really, when it comes down to it, I'm so sorry there's someone blowing leaves around. When it comes down to it, it's about our people and our communities. And I would love to see the fashion industry decide to support the first designers of this nation, really.
And that's beautiful. I love that. I also just feel with collaborations, just going back to the collaboration aspect, is that it's time that we really rethink that and really look, you know, with a lot of people that have approached us, it's really not the time for the 1% back or the 2% royalty. It's really time that there's just a more active participation in creating transformative resources for our communities. So it's really the time to step up and look at the way those collaborations are done, because we have to find ways to do more. Absolutely. So, yeah.
Love that. Well, thank you guys so much. I think there's some questions. So we only have like 10 minutes, 15 minutes left, so we should probably open it up. I think Sasha's going to pop back in, I believe.
Hi.
Hi.
So I just want to thank everyone for submitting these questions. There are so many. We will not be able to get to all of them, but we appreciate your contribution. And if I can direct these to the specific designers post-webinar, I will. So the first question, as a non-Indigenous online marketplace, how can we be good allies and collaborators? How can we use our platform to uplift Indigenous designers? And what stories do you think non-Indigenous people need to hear? Open to anyone.
I'll pop in. Yeah, in the work that we've been doing with the Yellowtail Collective, we're committed to supporting our cultural artists. One of the things to note is that our communities have never had opportunity to sell their work in a way that sustains our families. And that is #1 priority for us. So we've created a model where our artists get 70% of retail profits instead of the traditional wholesale model. And so I really want to champion that thought process in how we can support Native artists, yes, sell their work, yes, but also ensure that it benefits them in a sustainable way that's going to be sustainable for their families and communities. And so I'm happy to connect people with Native artists. There's so many, like you can find them with a really easy Instagram search, but also ask, like, make sure they're Native people, make sure, because there's tons of work out there that they're selling non-Native works, they're manufactured elsewhere, and they present as if they're Native. And so I would definitely say for a marketplace looking to invest in Native people and Native communities, go to the source, support Native artists, and know it's going to come small batch, it's going to come well made, it's going to come with like more thought and integrity than you would at a traditional manufacturer. But it's a different way of thinking about products. You can't just crank these things out. They take time, they take thought. A lot of our people, when we make things, if you're experiencing, you know, life's challenges or not in a good way, like they put things down. So we have to think of that from a cultural lens. These products are not just made to be consumed.
Yeah, and I would just, the only thing I would build on to that, I mean, again, it's all about equity and partnership. And any one of these people in this circle, and I know there's so many other Native folks, right, that are probably sitting in this circle today with us, right, that can make the connection. But I think it's like that, there was a question about the education component, and I think it's understanding, like from the research, the majority of Americans know little to nothing, and what most they do is inaccurate, right? So, but there's this beautiful opportunity, like as you've heard every one of these artists and designers talk about, their storytelling, right? And it's short form, right? But it's sort of like, what tribe is this person from? What state? Like, can they do a little bit of just like a minute of saying where they're from and who they are, and to talk and to give context and story around the piece that they've created. And those short form pieces of content that can accompany, like in an online marketplace, that twofold, right? I think your customer really leans in because it's so wonderful to be able to walk away not only with something beautiful, but understanding the story and the place and the connection. But it also does this whole other extra benefit of like centering a Native person in a contemporary role and humanizing them. And that even goes further in terms of when we think about how transformative that is in our country, when we can really truly see each other's humanities and stories.
But I want to say back to kind of the question in terms of investing in business and partnership, what Bethany was talking about. I think it's really important to stress the actual commitment to a partnership, and that the Indigenous artist or fashion designer is not the token quote Indian, so that the fashion company or corporation can then go run with that image. And we've seen that happen way too many times. And I think it's also important to note, there are Indigenous artists who there's diversity in terms of Indigenous artists who make ready to wear, and that there's a different process with that versus Orlando Guy versus the Jamie Okuma shirt that you're wearing, Christian. So there's Very beautiful. So I'm just saying, in terms of investment, it's not just this token one-off, but the future longevity of representation beyond inclusion, but to help Indigenous people shine in the foreground and not just in the background of giving an image, for example.
And I just real quickly, I would say, look at Faraday Brand and what they're doing, right? They're partnering with Bethany, but they also have a leader of their board who guides the decisions of their company, right? So like if Crystal's on the board there, then that just shows the values of a company to bring in other voices. And I suspect that they don't only ask Crystal's opinion if it's related to American Indian things, but like they bring Crystal's perspective as an Indigenous woman to the table, right? And so I think if you have a brand that's large enough, bringing in Indigenous voice at that level, like at leadership level, can open up doors like you can't even imagine, because most people don't even know how to access our communities. And there is so, like, the one lesson that I'm hearing here that no one specifically said is there is so much talent out there in our communities, and the world is missing out on it.
That part, yes.
Thanks for all that feedback. That was great. So this is for the 3 designers on the panel. So as your businesses continue to grow and expand and you're building more connections, do you try to keep your production, your marketing, your sales, your staff and employees within the Native American and Indigenous community, or do you have to go out of that network? How are you handling that?
One thing that I think is odd is when people see our Instagram feed or how we, like the models and stuff that we hire, over 10 years, over 80% of the models we have ever hired are citizens of federally recognized tribes. And it blows people's minds sometimes when they're just like, wow, why do you, like as a Native brand, like why do you have an African-American person on there? Well, they're actually a citizen of a federally recognized tribe. Or how come this like white guy with a beard is on your brand? You know, this is a Native brand. It's like, well, actually he's a citizen of a federally recognized tribe. So we are very intentional. We don't have an Indian preference hiring, but I will say like over 10 years, greater than 90% of people we've ever hired on all aspects, not just modeling, are either citizen of a federally recognized tribe and or are a like first degree ally, meaning they are either married to or have family that are citizens of federally recognized tribes. We're really intentional about it.
I'll pop in here too. I have an amazing team. My team's really diverse, but I also have directly on my staff 3 Native women who are in leadership positions and are citizens of their nations. And so for me in this journey of fashion, I was always the only Native person in the room. I worked in corporate fashion in Los Angeles for years, and I was the only person from a tribal nation. And it's really difficult to get in an industry, period. So as a Native owned and operated business and thinking about how we are as community members, it's really important to me to cultivate opportunities for our people. So in that means internships, creating space where our artists can sell their work, creating opportunities for leadership for Native people to lead that with us. And so I absolutely love to create opportunities for people, but we also have so many amazing allies. I also like to think about the work that we do and the ways it connects to our Indigenous relatives who maybe traditionally come from south of the so-called border. And those are still Indigenous people that have all to do with the ways the American fashion industry operates, period. And so thinking about it in that way, we don't limit ourselves to just Native people or Native employees, but how we like create stronger relationships with our Indigenous relatives in the States, period.
Yeah, and I can just talk on our brand. We actually relocated to the Southwest. I started for Kinship in California, but the journey back home was really so we could reinvest more in the young and emerging talents of the tribe and the surrounding tribes. So I think that's a big part of what we want to do in the future, is just to continue to create those opportunities, to give more young designers the space to have a web portal, to be involved in retail pop-ups that we're doing, so that they can have more exposure in the market. So that's really been a big focus.
Thanks. So I think we have time for one more question, and this one is open to everyone to contribute their feedback. Does anyone have any thoughts on this year's Met Gala theme, which is American fashion? What are your hopes to see? Do you have concerns about cultural appropriation within this theme? We'll love any thoughts you all have on how they're going to approach American fashion.
There's going to be many appropriation issues at this Met's Gala.
Don't do it, people. That's my message. Let that message ring loud and clear to anyone that's going to the Met Gala. Don't appropriate Native fashion, feathers. I mean, all of these things. And I think inherently now there's very little excuse to not understand what's wrong and what's harmful, and invite you to come visit our website at illuminatives.org. We're on Instagram. You know, we do a lot of that kind of education, and there's plenty of people that can help you understand what not to do. But I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities potentially to partner with Indigenous artists.
I would love to see at least a single Native person at the Met Gala. I don't know if that's happened. Well, Christian, you've probably been, yeah. I'd love to see Native people featured at a Met Gala. Like, we descend from the first designers of this nation, and our people are never truly celebrated in a way that we can connect to. I think that's one of the important things to point out in this, is like, we don't see ourselves in fashion, in the fashion global space, and that's why we're doing it ourselves. Yellowtail is the brand of my res girl dreams. It's the brand that I wish I had when I was a little girl. And I love to see Native women feel good and celebrated and feel empowered by the clothes they wear. And I hope in the future American fashion brands understand why that's so important.
And Native North Americans are the root and the heart and the original haute couturists of this country. Oh, you shrugged there. What do you mean?
I said, yep.
I say haute couture. I know some people are like, what does haute couture mean? Haute couture, to give context to the Indigenous perspective of the original designers of America.
I mean, my mouth just salivates at the thought of what could be on that carpet. Like, just thinking of, like you just said, like, Indigenous fashion is couture, like head to toe. It's handmade. The beadwork is like that some people are doing is like museum worthy. And so to think of what that could look like on a red carpet, like, blows my mind. And so I think this is a perfect opportunity, something like the Met Gala, for, you know, a major moment like that to happen. Like, that's what I need in my life. And I have hope it's going to happen.
Hook it up, Christian. Hook it up. Make it happen.
I'm putting it out in the world.
Not as an afterthought, though, you know, like, I think we always get clumped in as like, oh yeah, I forgot to include Native people. And I would love to see this thought about years in advance, as we know museum exhibitions are thought about way in advance. Like, bring people in leadership positions, bring them in as consultations. We have Amber Dawn and so many other people in our communities who are that their education is all around Indigenous culture and understanding our cultural identities and histories through art. We have plenty of those people in our communities all over, and it would be amazing to see them help shape that and not be just like, oh yeah, let's bring in a Native person at the end. Like, we need time. Beadwork, these, you know, Indigenous couture pieces, they take a lot of time. And so I'd love to see that eventually.
Well, thank you all. Now that we're at the end of the hour, I can't thank you enough for helping us kick off this conversation, for joining us, for all these insights and feedback. And we're so excited that Christian will be rejoining us next Wednesday, same time, for our second part of our conversation. A whole new group of incredible designers and industry experts. So I'll send through to everyone who's registered for this conversation today the link to join us next week, any resources discussed in this conversation, and a recording of this conversation so you can continue to share it as wide as we can. So Amy, Crystal, Bethany, Eric, Amber Dawn, and Christian, thank you all so much for joining us today, and take care.
Miigwech, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.